Hey, Bukola. And Elijah and Dauda, can you guys hear me? Hey, Elijah.
Hi
Good to see you,
Vivek, I
brother.
can hear you.
Okay. Hey, Dauda. And Bukola, do we have, can you give me a sense of how many people are in the room? Three, meaning just the three of us? Or three guests? Welcome. If people are here, welcome. Um, and is it possible for folks to kind of put into the chat who they are? The I think you have to press join the chat, right? And then is there a way, Bukola, for folks to just kind of like put in the chat who's present? So if we could ask folks to do that. And when you say Bukola, when you say two guests and me, obviously Elijah and Dauda are here, but you're not referring to them, right? There's two other symposium guests. Actually, I don't see Dauda anymore.
We have Mr. Elijah, and Dalda is not here anymore.
You might be having connection problems. Uh-huh. And then do we have anybody else like from the symposium, like people who have come to listen?
They are not on the stream yet. They are watching on YouTube.
I see. Okay. And do you have a sense of how many or?
I can't see that from here. But I'll let you know in the chat.
Okay. Hey, Dauda, there you are.
Vivek, how are you?
Good to see you. I'm just
Just have an internet interruption.
okay, no problem. And you remember Elijah?
Yeah, we spoke a few minutes ago.
Hey, Nicole. Where?
Yeah, Vivek. Yeah, Elijah and I we are just discussing a few minutes
Okay,
ago.
good. I'm just saying hi to Nicole, who's one person who's here and watching. Nicole, where you listening from or watching from?
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear us, Dauda?
The volume. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Are we starting now?
Yes, we are starting, Dauda.
Okay.
So welcome everybody. Looks like we have 12 folks here, and thank you so much for coming. This is okay. Nikki sounds good. Is in Washington D.C. There's 12 folks present. If people are able to drop in the chat your name and where you're listening in from, we would love to just get a sense of who's in the room. I am delighted to have this conversation with you guys about the global struggle for environmental justice. And my name is Vivek Maru. I, like Nicole, am here from Washington, D.C. Hey, Soile from Cleveland. Thanks for joining. I'm in Washington, D.C., and I started a group called Namati about 11 years ago. And Namati is dedicated to advancing social and environmental justice by combining the power of law with the power of people. And I am really thrilled to have this conversation with two folks who are incredible environmental justice leaders and also two of my favorite people, Dauda Golia and Elijah Lempera. And I appreciate the people who are chiming in about who they are and where they're from. Hey, Amandla, thanks for joining from Florida. Yeah, please keep that coming. It helps us to just get a sense of who's in the room. So let me say a word about Namati, the group that I run, and then I'm going to introduce these guys. And you guys can hear me well. The volume is clear. Okay, Elijah, good to see your thumbs up. And in the audience too, just let us know if there are any technical difficulties. This is a new platform for us. Namothi works on the ground in 6 different countries, and we also convene something called the Grassroots Justice Network, which has people from all over the world, every continent, nearly every country, all of whom are people who are trying to demystify law and put the power of law in the hands of ordinary people to tackle and confront and overcome grave injustices. And I want to say that part of what we're going to do is dive deep today in the 2 experiences, one in Sierra Leone and one in Kenya. But we're also going to zoom out to talk about what the struggle for environmental justice looks like globally. And because we convene this network, we have visibility into how these struggles are playing out in many different places. And our contexts vary greatly across Latin America and Asia and North America and Europe and Africa in terms of economy, in terms of history, in terms of legal systems. There's so much rich diversity across the world. And yet, despite that diversity, we see some deep commonalities in what communities facing environmental harm are experiencing, and also what they are envisioning, what they are demanding, what they are fighting for. So part of what we're going to do during this hour we have together is zoom out. We're going to dive deep into these 2 experiences, Kenya and Sierra Leone, and then we are also going to zoom out and talk a little bit about environmental justice globally. And those of you who are here, hey, Selena from Montgomery, Montgomery County. I was going to say Montgomery County, Rockville, Maryland. That's great to have you. And please do continue to introduce yourselves. We appreciate that. I was just going to say that the people who are here, you're not just here to listen. We want you to take part. This is going to be participatory. It's going to be a conversation. So let me just introduce these two guys. One is Dauda Golia, who himself grew up in a community affected by mining. So he grew up seeing some of the destruction that can be wrought by irresponsible mining in Sierra Leone. And Dauda has worked for many years as a community paralegal with the Namothi team in Sierra Leone. Does anybody, I wish I could see like a show of hands, but has anybody heard of community paralegals? Would anyone like to drop in the chat like a definition of what has anyone heard of community paralegals? Who's out there watching? We got like 19 people now, it looks like. Community paralegals are organizers who have knowledge of law and government, and they support people to use that knowledge in tandem with their own people power, law and organizing in tandem to achieve solutions and to stand up to and overcome deep injustice. And community paralegals are really a kind of key strategy, a key force for delivering on the promise of environmental justice and for making the law not just something that's sleeping in books or courtrooms, but something that is understood and used by ordinary people, which is our dream. And so Dauda has been working as a community paralegal alongside a team of community paralegals across Sierra Leone for many years. Dauda, are you able to hear us okay?
Yeah, hi everyone.
Do you want to say a word just about where you're calling from and a little bit more about what you do and why?
I'm calling from Bo. Bo is in the southern part of Sierra Leone. It is the second city in Sierra Leone. That is where I'm calling from.
Cool. And you want to say just a word more about what you do and why, Dauda?
Yeah, I work as a paralegal, and I have worked for almost 13 years now. I love the job because I have passion for the job. I grew up in a community that is ravaged by mining activities. And as I grew up, I saw the farmland being turned into man-made lakes, some areas being made into deserts. And eventually, as I grew up, I have no knowledge about what was environmental violations until I started working as a paralegal. That was the time I actually came to realize that indeed what the company was doing was an injustice to our environment.
Awesome. Thank you, Dauda. So great to have you. Thank you for dialing in. He's dialing in from a town called Bo in southern Sierra Leone, if you didn't pick that up. And the second person that I want to introduce is Elijah. And Elijah is Maasai. Some of you might have heard of the tribe called the Maasai, which are native to Kenya. He grew up as a pastoralist himself, meaning he walked with herds of animals across grazing lands in northern Kenya. And Elijah works with a group called Impact, which is an indigenous-led organization in northern Kenya. And Elijah supports a team of community paralegals. So welcome, Elijah. Thank you so much for being here. Do you want to say a little bit about where you're calling from and what you do and why?
Thank you, Vivek. As you just introduced, my name is Elijah Lempeira. I work for an organization called Impact. It's an indigenous peoples-led organization based in northern Kenya. And I work closely with NAMATI, and much of my work is really to support the pastoralist communities to use the available legal frameworks in the country to be able to secure their tenure rights. So that's what I do most of the time. I just coordinate a number of paralegals. We dive into the existing legislations to support these communities to be eventually registered. I am a Maasai. It's a pastoralist community in northern Kenya. And our main source of livelihood is really pastoralism. It's about livestock keeping. We move from place to place. Over time, I've been able to witness and see a shrinking spaces for grazing. And this is mainly articulated because of the continuous illegal acquisition of a pastoralist land. Because the land is not registered, so it opens a route for land grabbing. So these kind of things, I've seen it over time. So that's what really motivates me to continue working with this community, to see them eventually being able to secure their tenure rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Elijah, for being here, for dialing in from northern Kenya. I'm just going to pause. The next thing I'd like to do actually is show a little film from Sierra Leone. It's just 10 minutes, and I think it'll give you guys a vivid sense of the context of some of the struggles that Dauda and others are involved in, and then we'll talk a little bit more about that, about those stories. But before I do that, I just wanted to ask Nikki and Selena and Amanda and Swale, forgive me if I'm not pronouncing it right, and any others who are on the line with us. I just would love to hear from you guys in the chat about any questions you have at the outset or any hopes you have for this session, so we can make sure that it's meeting your expectations and addressing things that are on your mind. So if I would just invite folks to put in the chat, any hopes you have for the session, any questions you have. And again, what we're going to be doing is diving deep into stories of land and environmental justice from Kenya and from Sierra Leone, and then also zooming it out a bit to talk about what we are finding about the movements for grassroots environmental justice all around the world. So I'm just going to pause for a moment, see if we can hear from you guys in the chat. On Zoom, I would just pass the mic, but I think in this platform, the best we can do is you could type in a question or a hope for the session. Give it another moment. Thank you, Nikki. I'm excited to learn about the commonalities and differences in the EJ movement from our brothers and sisters across the globe. Great. That very much is in line with what we are hoping to dive into. Okay, I'm going to start the film, but feel free, anybody else. Thank you for that, Nikki. and forgive me if I'm not pronouncing your name right. I would love to allow you to say it out loud so we know how to pronounce, but I'm taking my best shot. And please do others chime in on the chat. And in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and kick this off. I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to play this movie. Can you guys see a film?
And be the village side of the water where they call Maho. Na me could call the Jabama.
Where they can I have for the bush. What's I said? I said this bush to get her. Now 3 people they get bush. Where they don't born. The one the way they don't die, and the one the way they not born it.
Na me been to Monya Jalo. I plant rice, I plant cabbage, carrots, yabas, etc., cassava, all the plants in the swamp. Like next month, so when October we plant until December, we able for harvest and we able for get money. 2015, now we they say one company don't kind of when a chief domo they say they want land. As most company that they say na Mangade the plants. We able for get influence way they don't for can't take all this land our hand. They say 50 years for the land before ever it grant to again.
Sierra Leone has always been blessed with natural resources. We have land, we have minerals. Over the years, since independence, these minerals have been exploited. People began talking about what we now refer to as the curse, the natural resource curse. We've seen a number of big companies coming in to exploit the minerals on our land. And we have not been able to pin down any of the benefits to communities that played host to these large investments.
They begin to say, the people then get for do something. That thing, now development, I say me that development, we don't go want that. Development we go make where I want plant plus I don't go get side for plant, pass I go by. If we say go sit down here, they can't take this down our hand. Now they now will store. How we go live? Who say we go there now? But who struggle be there for that thing there? then the whole meeting, then they even catch other people then where then they deny for put to the cell. So no go free down there. Now we'll get that. We say for talk so by most someone, you know go find. Law form a organization where it go be say now the land they defend. This na Martin they can count to be help.
We know the importance of law in society and how law really anchors the development of humankind. But unfortunately, for many people, the law is a mystery, something that only those who are trained deal with. And so what we try to do is to unpack this mystery.
And they say, okay. Would I go be before this case here? I say, me, I don't go school, but I go there before. I go be the leader for Una.
Ms. Jallo's flee to Guinea during the war was one of the things she told us is making her stand up against the oil palm plantation. She was able to say, land is our life. Our land is our future. Our land is our everything. If the oil palm plantation occupies the whole of her chiefdom, will be left as refugees. But Mrs. Jallow and others used organizing. They were able to approach the chiefdom administration to tell them that there is a law in this country that stops people from forcing others to give up their land. And they as well met some company officials and told them that the law does not allow anybody to force the hands of another person to give their land for any form of investment. It has to come from them, from the landowners themselves. Ms. Jallow and others were able to bring themselves together as a group that they called the Mapele Landowners and Users Association. And they saw themselves operating as a unit. They did not just form the group for landowners. They were as well able to incorporate the land users. So that tells us that Ms. Jallow is a very clever woman. She knows that it's not only the landowners that are in that chiefdom. There are as well people in that chiefdom who are just land users. They are as well benefiting from that land. So they were able to use that group, that knowledge that they had in the law to get the company to void the lease.
Yes.
Because all what he did now we get her. I tell Allah thank you because what will be planned, he go through. And what will fit for, we will forget her.
The company is still flouting some parts of this agreement. And that is making the landowners regret even giving their land.
Yeah,
Nyanya peda wino ke biso e mu ko to ko to ye pa we na be te ya ma fe ma ne te go ye mala na to mo na ye go e hati mo wo hati nu e mu wo wo hu me nia.
Because now right forgets the company for do a part of the bargain, even when we know they are around safe. We have roughly around 6,000 to 7,000 villages in Sierra Leone. It will be tough going for the paralegals to go into every village and basically rehash this whole process of community land protection. These communities should be able to influence law and ensure that the laws that are made reflect the lived realities of these communities. Land in Sierra Leone largely is governed by customary law, and those lands are not documented. We are trying to reform our centuries-old land laws to ensure that the land is now vested in the people themselves. We were able to build a database of experiences and cases that we've been involved with over a period of time. And that became the basis for us to launch into policy advocacy. Policies don't change things very much. You need the policy provisions to be translated into law that could be enforced.
The bill entitled the Customary Land Rights Act 2022, being an act to provide for the protection of customary land rights, the elimination of discrimination.
We have seen the introduction of two important bills in Parliament, the Customary Land Rights Bill and the National Land Commission Bill.
Well, I think I'm glad you see the woman.
We had hundreds of community folks, women especially, coming out to show Parliament that we want these bills passed.
Wetlands, wildlife, habitats, virgin forests, etc. The protection of ecological sensitive areas are going to be guaranteed by this bill when once it is passed into law.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. The ayes have it.
I think we've taken the first step in addressing that marginalization, that power imbalance. Now communities are going to be front and center of these transactions. They can say yes or no to investments, and that would stick because it is backed by law.
Anything where they do, you wonder for let it succeed, you don't go easy. But if you boku, the one where they left, then go here, you will see them they talk again.
Okay, thanks for watching. Could somebody, and I appreciate Selena, the question that you put in, hopefully actually the film itself spoke to that a little bit, because the struggle that Mrs. Jallow led against a land grab that would have destroyed 75,000 acres of rainforest in southern Sierra Leone, that was one of 300 struggles like that that happened over the last 10 years in Sierra Leone. And that her community won. They were able to push back and reverse that land grab. Dauda and I both know Mrs. Jallow very well. And not all of the 300 of those struggles that happened over the last 10 years were successful like hers was, but some of them communities won, some of them communities lost, and most of the time it's somewhere in between. It's like a partial victory. But out of those many, many struggles came a movement for a new piece of legislation called the Customary Land Rights Act. And that law passed last year, and it was envisioned by communities based on their own experiences with how the existing framework was failing to protect their rights. And as you saw in the film, it does some powerful new things. It gives every community across the country the right to free, prior, informed consent over any industrial activity on their territory. It also bans industrial development over forest zones, and it empowers local land use committees and requires that those committees be at least 1/3 women. So making sure that women's voices are part of who makes decisions about land. So please do, if you have more questions or observations about the film, please put those in the chat. And as you do so, I'm just going to turn it over to Dauda. Dauda, could you tell us a little bit more about your experience of struggles similar to Mrs. Jallow's, and also what has happened in the year since the laws passed? They passed 1 year ago. What has happened since?
Yeah, thank you very much, Vivek. I think the documentary has shown some samples of the work we actually do in the field. Coming back to that documentary, actually, 30,700 hectares of land was leased without the consent of the landowners. that in its own created some very serious division in that entire chiefdom. There were those who were opposed to the investment. It was their right to say no because they were not consulted. And there were those who said, we want the investment. But even if we want the investment, we need to be consulted. Certain procedures need to be followed. And these are some of the challenges we actually come along because the old law that we are operating on, the Provinces Land Act Cap 122, although the land belongs to the families by them, but the chiefdom authorities, we are the custodians. They were supposed to look after the land for and on behalf of the people. And they use that particular clause to go into bad land deals without consulting the landowners. So you find out that in certain situations, people stand up for their right to say, no, this is our land. You will not go into any deal without our consent. And so we come in to help people to do the right thing, because if you want to say no to the investment, there are certain procedures to follow because it's your right. And when people want to acquire land, there are certain procedures also they have to follow. And this new land law has made it very clear, because in the past, there was no FPIC, and that is exactly what happened in Mrs. Jallo's case. But now, people are saying, no, if investment should go on, the law has also made it clear that if you want investment to go on, there must be FPIC. And it's based on that FPIC that people will say no or yes to the investment. And like over the weekend, some communities we have been in, they just took a lease agreement to them and asked them to sign. And the people said, no, we are not going to sign a lease agreement of this one. If you want to mine on our land, we have to sit together and plan the lease agreement. And that is the kind of thing this new law has given to people, that there must be FPIC. And in the past, some decisions were taken by the men alone without bringing the women into it. And anytime there is any bad land deal, you find out that the women and the children suffer the most. But this new law has actually given the women the space to participate in land governance, even at community level. And that is what we are now seeing in most of the areas we operate. You will see women being heads of landholding families to decide on the fate of their land. Because anytime such bad land deals are being made, they and their children will suffer a lot. And you'll find out that women normally have very good plans for the future when it comes to land matters. But in the past, they were being left out. Like in the documentary, you clearly saw how Mrs. Jallo and other women were able to stand up for their right. And interestingly though, the land they fought for is now part of the Gola National Rainforest Park, in an area where the government is practicing conservation. And they are deriving lots of benefit from the conservation they are practicing in that part of the country. They are having royalties at the end of every year. They are having scholarship for their children from the no they said to that particular investment. You know, so there are a lot people are now benefiting from the new land laws.
Thank you, Dauda. And Sophie, we'll get a link to this 11-minute film in the chat shortly. It's called Beside the Water, and it's about how a community in southern Sierra Leone was able to reverse a land grab of 75,000 acres of rainforest, and how that and many other that community and many others came together to pass a transformative new piece of legislation last year. And Dauda, thank you for sharing more about how that legislation has been playing out and why it was necessary. There's an expression in Sierra Leonean Creole, land business, now man business. That's what they used to say, that land affairs are meant for men to handle. And so one of the important things that Dauda was emphasizing was that the new law ensures that that's no longer the case, that women are at the table. They make up 1/3 of these land management committees that the law requires. And so no land business, no will be man business again. It's not going to just be man business. It's going to be land questions are going to be ones which men and women together deliberate, as well as both the land owning families as well as land using families, meaning ones who are living there but aren't necessarily part of the customary owners of that place. Youth as well. So part of what the law does is make sure that land governance is more inclusive. Please do, if you have more questions, please do go ahead and put those in the chat. And in the meantime, I'm going to turn over to Elijah, who, if you're joining late, he's dialing in from northern Kenya, and he works with a group called Impact. Elijah, you know, we were just talking about this law in Sierra Leone that passed last year, the Customary Land Rights Act. In Kenya, there was a reform, a very important reform that passed back in 2016, so several years earlier. Could you tell us a little bit about that law and also about the history, the historical context in Kenya with respect to indigenous peoples and common lands that made that law necessary?
Thank you, Vivek. In the Kenyan context, just before we go into this new law that we have in the country, the indigenous peoples and local communities, like for instance, where I come from, the pastoralist communities, for centuries, we've always had our own traditions and customs that govern land ownership and access. But at the same time, we've had progressive government regimes. But even before that, there were colonial masters that came in Kenya around 1895. And during that time, they also came up with another law, the Crown Land Ordinance. In that sense, they say that all the land that's unoccupied or wasteland shall be land that is under the crown, which in essence, it's very interesting because you have the pastoralists and other indigenous communities who've been living in these particular areas and land, but now there's a law that says that that land is unoccupied, it's a wasteland. So you can see how discriminatory it was from the word go, and that ushered in another law, the Trust Land Act around 1939, which the same case also gave opportunity, or rather the powers, to the former county councils to be in charge or to hold that land in trust for the communities that are living communally. And then after that, around 1968, we have another law, Group Representative Act, 1968. And if you look at all these legislations or these laws, they were never enacted to protect the land of the pastoralist communities and other indigenous communities in Kenya. They only opened opportunities and routes for exploitation and land grabbing. During that period of time, so many communities lost huge parcels of land to individuals, politicians, and all these kind of people. But then, as time went by, local organizations and other civil society organizations, the communities themselves started making noise. And when we got the new constitution in 2010, it provided a new opportunity for the parliament to enact a law that will govern and provide security to community lands in Kenya. And that was really a huge success, even for communities in Kenya that have been living in this land without documents that shows that the land is theirs. So when we got that constitution, it provided that opportunity, and then we got the new law that we are talking about, the Community Land Act, which repealed those other laws, the Group Representative Act and the Trust Land Act. It really tried to harmonize these other laws that existed, that in essence were not providing security for the land of the indigenous and local communities in the country. So when this new law came into place, it was a blessing for pastoralist communities, for instance, and indigenous communities that have been living in land in these particular areas without documents. a legal document that shows the land is theirs. It provided spaces and opportunities for them to pursue the registration process. And that was what we've been doing ourselves, supporting these communities to use the opportunity that exists to register their community lands. This law really has tried to bring power back to the people. It gives power to the community assembly, which are all the adults in that particular community. So it makes it even difficult for people to make decisions in communities, because it clearly stipulates that it's to that of the community assembly that approves any kind of investment or disposition of land in a community. So it's huge. It helps communities to protect the land. Those are some of the gaps that existed in the previous laws that we had. Another thing, it also tried to work around the inclusivity part of it. We never had like women being part of landowners under the previous laws. Women were never also present in community land management committees. These are some of the opportunities and spaces that came into place because of this new law. So if you look at it in a general view, it has really tried to bring, give power to the people, and also try to bring also the minority groups like women, youths, to be part of land management and decision making. So that's how it looks, and that's how it is. This law, and as where we stand at now, several communities have been able to use this law to be able to secure their tenure rights. Some have been able to receive their community land titles. Others are still in the process. There are also other difficult challenges that exist that communities are still struggling with. But at the same time, this even actualization of this law was made possible by communities themselves. Organizing and bringing these communities to speak together as one was one key ingredient that made it effective in terms of pushing government to actually put in place the necessary structures for communities to be able to register the land. Because if you look at it, the law was there, but there was no implementation of it. So communities, we brought communities together to speak as one and march to government offices to demand for services, to act on their mandate. And this is what made it possible for those that have been able to register and those that are still in the process to continue in this process of registration of community lands. Yes.
Thank you, Elijah. Awesome. I wanted to pick up a acronym that Dauda mentioned in his remarks, FPIC. And let me know in the chat, are you familiar? Have you heard of that before, FPIC? Is that familiar to you guys? I'm wondering how common that concept is in our audience. FPIC stands for Free Prior Informed Consent. And that is a basic demand that we hear from environmental justice communities all around the world, in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, here in North America. We don't have communities facing harm don't have that basic ability to say yes or no, whether an outside investment should happen in their neighborhood, on their lands or not. And if so, if yes, on what terms? Permitting is something that the state agencies do. It's not something, or maybe you also need a zoning permit from the county government, but it's not something that the community itself has decision-making power over. And so when we talk about the global movement for grassroots environmental justice, this basic idea of free, prior, informed consent, that communities facing harm should have the ability to make decisions about what happens in their places. That is something that we hear from all around the world. And it's something that is guaranteed both in the Sierra Leone law that we talked about that was passed last year, as well as in the 2016 Community Land Act. And so both of those laws are really important reforms for those reasons. And as Dauda and Elijah emphasized, they didn't just get passed by themselves. It was communities who fought to get those laws passed. They were hard won. They grew out of grassroots struggles. Okay, good to hear, Suela, that you have heard of it. Sophie, glad you're here so that you can hear more. We have time to show one more very short film about what Elijah was just describing, which he said that, the law got passed in 2016, but then government wasn't doing its part to implement the law. And so communities took it on themselves to pursue the steps laid out in the Community Land Act to protect their grazing lands. And then eventually they came together and marched in Nairobi to the Ministry of Lands to push government to start implementing this law nationwide. And so let's just watch that. It's less than 7 minutes, and then we'll come back and continue the conversation. Jenna, if you could help me to press play.
Kiata kangulu wetu watolling. Samu tuman kiata nyesiang kiata dintu woki hata baga mali. Hata ngko bana duaga na ngko betepat na yer duaga ba ko ngorol tumana. Diga tal tumana gutu ada mo kura tanga wilu.
Kemanya na kono kuliponi kiti kitangkara korta tang kodal tayo tata koto kata beji iguna serikali shirianya bana bitisha bebi inda sha yo ngore chake kiata sha yo ngop nange beroli kita kemanya uang gwe yo bitisha serikali lomano yema duina anya serikali itu kena gua negara kayu
Untuk nuku ya mani ka baga mereng ka anako batangkai ko. Nubu ni jani ni nyata bari nyana untuk nuntu dua ya. Nyato ngitu nuku de tongku tuko.
Kapsa gima randi. Yugo tu dul to ko igu angurung ko nul to kalo agu kalo ngani tibra kita barbar luis barbar itu ani beral tong kon. Mata yul tata ana majirin ka bagana ka kona na kora ka kita tum tai to mata na ka bagno bunang gulu bodu angka barbol su tu meni.
So we have tried to put into practice the law itself. First of all, we engage communities to understand what the law entails. And secondly, we try to engage communities to make the good use of the law. And that's where organizing comes in.
Nanyo na ba sa joka jas ba mbango ngulupo. Yul da wana kara nanu ta we bungu ta wana kara maka boni na nya ka joni jas ta ramati na likini nche ne liko ninche.
The law requires for you as a people to have your community clearly identified. You need to also elaborate your clear boundaries. These are the processes that we have been working through with communities. So we sit down with the communities, we try to adhere what's required by the law. If it's a matter of development of bylaws to demonstrate governance, to demonstrate membership, to demonstrate grazing and other uses of land, that's where we come and sit with communities. We develop these bylaws together.
Keriti tuyo. Korta na dua krawso. Nalo ngli kata. Iki ascho to nobo. Am korta ta yo miki yo dimbata ni kunum kalam. Kona karang kiata. Mi ngora ni jogi yo mon tonko koro. Ni ligi ni jaju ni ger ni je.
One key strategy is to ensure that women participate in all these processes. So the communities have started to embrace some change. So when the community management committee meetings are held, women also voice out their issues. In also development of bylaws, women sit together with men, and they're also given adequate time to participate effectively.
When to get what to do, Korta go to report watch at the time. I'm going a pata samburu. Yo, making Tomana to Gugana Lawa. Koretata, Mate Gugana Chetimigiti. Mate and Gugana Nabu Migiti. Natoktagun to get about not to run a digata mana. Ora babu bijo na bar Nairobi. Ora ta ina bar. Igu to wana yo ni gijo aka kiasita.
Yildan tukuna ta baka don gubu maritika ya juka baka na ta derro. Kauntinungan mata imme tanan na shama shogare.
Mukura ta thoni misi detail. Nugu ba do ni ngorio na asraga sitini. Ijo gijo enyoto mata asana. Ni nyoto to ni kurkur ko de kita asa to nobo.
Nekin damana ta naramata kanara mata damana ta la yobo wala batini sit. Ai wota na do ngoji ne imito no pui. Muyi na bar ni wona shama jing na jinga to serikali pi. Na itu na shaka baya na nini. Na kai bonga na ka penyel do rojo to duang ngoite ne imi.
Kalau dua antu kamana muka tu dua juga apa bang asana tuki. Mata itu kena bunyi kiata. Nah aku dal dana aja tu kamana kiasa tata. Nugu mga silik ni der. Udah nda na baru banero nda ngamario.
Egidi yildo na tata sheria ni amo yura boldo situ mai mende woni medoki Europe. Yiro tata mugure atan to na jega bagana so a ato dua na tata ma to dua na tata bauti kidogo. Ka to dua na jokor no iti ka atan kubu. Na ka dal tata jokor na to gi kete jenga ta bauti o shage. Adu mo tata bauti wono shikata.
Nah kore shaga atan gulu bote wato leng. Atan gulu bote pat. Am kore barna tu kono gulu bote pato leng. Barno ko kutu monya to ni tuntuli. Mato lo sia je ta na ngana ko. Ni gara mai tenkara, ni gara mai tiso.
Thank you. Yeah, so that film shows in detail what Elijah was describing. I just want to turn it to the audience. Do you have questions or observations or reflections for Elijah, for Dauda, about either film or either experience, or how this relates to things that we are seeing in the United States? Please do type those in. And while you're doing so, I will just offer something of a framework. Actually, before I do that, let me ask you, Elijah, as I'm hoping folks from the audience will step up with questions or observations. But in the meantime, let me just ask you, Elijah, what has happened since that film? So that the film, it takes us through to 2019 when that march happened in Nairobi. Up to then, the government had not done its part to implement the law, and communities were saying, "We've done our part. We've mapped our lands, we've deliberated bylaws, we've followed the steps that the law requires of us. We want you to do your part so that we can put in applications and our customary land rights can be recognized for the first time." What has happened since 2019, and what are you and the community paralegals that you work with focused on now?
Thank you, Vivek. Since that, when communities marched to Nairobi, government also responded and created reformed a committee on implementation of Community Land Act, and it was also subsequently be able to appoint community land registrars to different counties. So that alone was really a success because it made government to realize that these communities are actually ready and they know what the law says. And then they acted on that and appointed community land registrars, who are the people who are mandated to receive community documents for registration. Since then, after that, some communities have been able to register their community lands. In this sense, we have two different types of communities. We have communities that were living as group ranches then, former group ranches, and we have others that are under the trust land. Group ranches were registered under the former law, the Group Representative Act. So in essence, they had their own titles. So what these communities or what the law required is for them to start the process afresh to re-register their land. And the process for them was a bit easier because as much of the work was done under the previous law. But we have those communities that were living under the unregistered land, the former trust land, and the process for them was very difficult because it requires communities to come up with the process of demarcation, survey, and adjudication. That's the bigger part, and where so many challenges exist. So if you look at from that time to now, majority or most of the communities that were living as former group ranches were able to register their land and receive their community land titles. Those that are still trust land are still in the process. They have been able to meet all the requirements for them to register the land. They've been able to organize their communities. They have done the elections of their community land management committees, as what the law says. They've been also been able to develop their community registers, and this is now where they have included women for the first time and children in those registers. At the same time, they've been able to develop their own community rules and regulations. It's also another one very critical document for communities that they need to develop these traditional rules, incorporate so that they develop rules that govern their land and all its natural resources. So even for those communities that have not been able to register their land to date, all of them, most of them have been able to go through the process and have their documents ready. Part of the work that's remaining is there are so many politics around, especially in unregistered community lands, several interests involved. And these are, because we look at Kenya, for instance, the Kenya Vision 2030, its flagship projects, all of them are headed towards northern Kenya. This is where the pastoralist communities live. And this is where we are talking about the unregistered community lands. So it's more easier to even acquire that land, to do these government projects when the land is still unregistered land. So if you look at it in a broader terms, success has been made. Communities were able to push government to act on its mandate. Some communities have been able to register the land and receive titles. Others are still in the process of doing that, and they have met most of the key requirements. What we are working on currently, we are still in the process of pursuing the process of registration for those communities that are yet to register the land. We understand the complexity and the journey that these communities need to go through. So we are still working with them through the process. And at the same time, even for those that have been able to register, there are other challenges that they have. We have investments coming into these community lands. So, and when they come, they're always less or some that came way before, and they have agreements with communities. And when you go through those documents, you realize that there are so many injustices or things that happen without the knowledge of the communities. So communities are into contracts with investors, but the terms that are in those contracts are really unfavorable for the communities. So that's another work we are working on currently. We are working with communities to go through their those that already have existing contracts with investors, to go through those documents and to seek opportunities for reviews. And for those that are, because others are already receiving, getting investors coming to the communities, we will go into them and we work with them throughout the process, ensuring that FPIC is fully adhered to, community is fully involved in the process, and also what the law says about 2/3 of the community assembly approving all transactions that happens in the community. So that's in broad what we are working on at the moment.
Thank you, Elijah. We got about 6 minutes left. Sophie, thank you for the question about how Namathi works. We and the partners we work with, like Impact, which is the group that Elijah works with, we will typically identify a region where we know that there is significant land and environmental injustice, and then recruit community paralegals who are organizers who are deeply rooted in the places that they come from, and those people have trust, they have legitimacy. And so communities who have issues, who have problems, they will typically find our community paralegals. Dauda can say more about it. He's a paralegal himself. Dauda, about how, Sophie's question about how do communities end up finding us, you know? And then the other question you asked, Sophie, is, are other countries in Africa following Kenya's lead and granting communities title to land? Yes, there has been a wave of reforms across different African countries. There was a Lei de Terra in Mozambique back in 1997. Liberia passed the Community Land Act in 2018. There was a Community Land Act in Uganda. So there have been a number of important similar reforms. I think one of the big challenges has been around robust implementation. And I actually wanted to just offer a framework that we like to think about in terms of legal empowerment. We call it the legal empowerment cycle. And Jana, maybe if you could help me with the slides, I'll share that with the audience.
Thank you very much, Vivek. There are different ways communities we hear or communities will get to communities. First, there are times we go out on fact-finding visit. That is to find out where companies are operating in a particular region. Like for Namati Sierra Leone, we are operating in 4 regions. And in those 4 regions, we go out to areas where we know companies might be operating. And then we have community engagement. We tell them about the work we do. And from that, they will grow interest in our work and then ask us to work with them. There are certain times clients that we have worked with or communities that we have worked with will inform other communities about our work, and then they will contact us. There are times we have radio discussions, and through those radio discussions, we give out our numbers to the audience, and people will call us that we have social companies operating in this and these areas, and they will reach out to those areas. So we have various ways we know about companies operating in different parts, and that is how we visit those communities.
Thank you. Thank you, Dauda. Jen, if you could, we just got a couple minutes left. And Jen, if you could pull up the slides, I just want to quickly go over a couple points. I want to invite everyone who's present to join the Grassroots Justice Network. So actually, Jenna, skip forward. This is a global community. There are people from every country in the world, nearly every country in the world, like 175 countries, who are all pursuing social and environmental justice by combining the power of law with the power of people. And we would love to have you be a part of it. And its membership is free, and you can join at this link. And Jen, if you can move forward one more slide. We have a monthly newsletter specifically on land and environmental justice. And this is the link for how you could sign up for that newsletter. And then if you just move forward one more slide. There are working groups on environmental justice globally. So people who are looking at corporate accountability, climate finance, how communities can be engaged in shaping global policy. And I would invite all of you who are present to be part of those working groups. You will be working with peers from around the world to deepen and build a global environmental justice movement so that we are acting collectively on demands that we have in common. So I just want to extend sincerely that invitation to everyone for coming who came. Thank you guys for being here. And then what I want to close with is if you could go back. Yes, and we have monthly movement calls, which you will also find out about and be welcome to if you sign up at the link that Jana put into the chat. But if you could go back to the first slide, Jana, I just wanted to, in summary, talk about what we call the legal empowerment cycle. And I think it really came through strongly in both these stories from Sierra Leone and from Kenya. And the legal empowerment cycle is about knowing law, using law, and shaping law. And that is what we want everyone around the world to be able to do. For too long, law has been a domain dominated by lawyers, by experts, and we want to change that. We want law to be something that ordinary people can know, use, and shape. And so on the left side of this wheel of this cycle, you have communities who are using the laws we have on the books right now, imperfect as those laws are, to try to solve concrete problems. And then when you do that, like Mrs. Jallow tried to reverse that land grab in her backyard of the rainforest that she lived and depended on. But when you do that, many communities can come together to envision and demand systemic changes, either better laws or changes to the way the law is being implemented at scale. And that's what happened with the Customary Land Rights Act in Sierra Leone. That's what happened when those communities came together to march in Nairobi to insist on measures to implement the Community Land Act nationwide. When you do get commitments from government to systemic change, those don't implement themselves. Those become new hooks and levers which communities and community paralegals can invoke to solve their own problems in their own neighborhoods. And that's how the wheel continues. That's why it's a cycle and not just a one-way street. So you go from knowing and using existing rules to solve problems in your backyard, to coming together with others to try to get better rules, and then back again. Know law, use law, shape law. That is the framework that we have in mind and the wheel that we are trying to turn together around the world. And I would love for all of you to be a part of that struggle with all of us. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much, Elijah and Dauda, for calling in from Southern Sierra Leone and Northern Kenya. The struggles that we face, even though our contexts vary greatly, there are deep commonalities among them. And I cherish this opportunity to build solidarity with all of you. Peace, everybody.
Thank you, Vivek.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone else.
Thanks, everyone.